This video is sponsored by Surfshark, the best VPN on the market. Surfshark is an app or browser extension that allows you to change your location to access websites in other countries and keep you safe and secure from hackers. Using Surfshark, we here in Ireland can access other countries' Netflix libraries or other streaming platforms like DAZN in Spain for all those important Premier League games. Surfshark keeps you safe and private by protecting everything you do online. Everything. When your device connects to the internet, all that information is, in a way, blurred out. Surfshark is particularly useful for keeping you safe from being hacked if you use public Wi-Fi. Let's say you're in a cafe, you're at college, you're out and about, they've got you covered. Surfshark allows you to use one subscription on unlimited devices, meaning you can share your account with friends or family or that neighbour who's a little bit cheap. On top of all of this, Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can also upgrade to Surfshark One, which includes the VPN, an alert system for breaches related to your data such as emails and credit cards, and an antivirus software for your desktop. Our sign-up offer gives you Surfshark VPN for a little over €2 a month. Simply scan the QR code on screen right now or use the link in the description. What is up, my friends? Myself and Mr. David Lynch are back to have a little talk about Liverpool's 1-0 victory over Girona last night, a result that keeps Arne Slot's men perfect in the Champions League. 6 wins from 6, and David, I mean, we'll take the win, but there's certainly improvements that could be made from the performance.
Yeah, I think I sort of saw more of the positives than Arne Slot did at full time, really. I mean, to get through the Champions League, I mean, 18 points is definitely going to get you through in the top 8. So that as a starting point is brilliant. 6 wins from 6, only conceded 1 goal, which came in the 3rd minute of the AC Milan game. So you kind of overall in the Champions League campaign so far be very, very positive. But obviously Arne Slot really quite unhappy with elements of the performance. And I kind of watched a bit of it back today as well, when you're out of the kind of waiting on the result and just having a cool head watching it. And I kind of get what you were saying. Liverpool probably too easily played through in that first half, gave up a lot of shots, which, when we've seen in previous games where the press hasn't quite worked, they've not actually given up many chances as a result of that. So I think that was the element that most annoyed him, really. And I think maybe you'd expected a bit more of a kind of energetic performance in the press when you'd consider that you'd had the Saturday off. So I think he was really disappointed with that. But, it depends which side of the fence you kind of sit on. I guess the huge positive is all those things that are listed at the start there is that Liverpool are basically through and they don't have to really worry about the 2 last group games. Definitely avoided a playoff, and that's fantastic. But obviously, the manager has to worry about the big picture in terms of the fact that to keep getting good results, the performances have to be there, and he obviously wasn't particularly happy with what he saw.
I've got to say, though, David, I love that ruthless streak in him. I love the fact that, yes, you could easily rest in your laurels and think 6 wins from 6, but ultimately he wasn't happy, as you said, particularly the first 45 minutes where we were giving up a lot of chances. Now, as you said in your match reaction yourself, the second half was a lot more measured and we controlled the game a lot better, certainly limiting the opportunities for Girona. But do you think he was right to be displeased? Because I do. And I think I like it because it would be too easy to get into a comfort zone, wouldn't it? Just picking up wins, picking up points. But ultimately, we know there are bigger tests ahead. And Arne is just trying to get the guys to that point where they are putting in better performances. Yes, the result matters, but so does the performance.
Yeah, it's not a bad time to basically give your players stick either, is it? If they've won and you just think, well, I can get a bit more out of them here. The players are probably more open to those messages after you've just won a game. And I do think he was genuinely quite annoyed with what had happened because, you watch the first half there and it was too easy to play around. The press, as he said, always seemed to be kind of a second late. And if you do that and you don't fully commit, you're never going to get there and put the opposition under pressure. I mean, there's one moment where Szoboszlai is pressing as hard as he usually does, and he turns around, noticed that the midfield hadn't followed him in, and that just made it so easy for 2 passes around him, and Girona were away. So, it's not just Slot who saw it, some of the players on the pitch as well. So, but I think the upside is he clearly told them that at halftime as well, and we already saw improvements at that point. I mean, after Liverpool go up 1-0 from that penalty, I think Girona only have 2 shots and they're both from miles outside the box, not much in terms of XG. So, Liverpool did get better at controlling it and not being as easy to play through. So that will have pleased him. But he obviously doesn't want to see that again, where it's that kind of slack and slow start. Because if you do that against a better side, I mean, if you do that against Fulham at the weekend, for example, who are very good at defending and very good at counter-attacking, then he might get hurt. So I think that's what he was kind of worried about. And I guess it's, he's put that warning shot out there now to the players, and they've got to heed it and show improvement over the coming games.
So there's a lot of good performances to go through individually last night, and I want to talk about Alisson in a minute. But before I do, one of the most peculiar bookings I've ever seen in a game of football last night, David, when Luis Diaz slips, goes to ground. It must have been a full 1 second later. We see, I think it's a knee into his shoulder, and then the Girona player rolls around on the ground. And somehow, in my warped world, I didn't think that was a booking, David, but referee couldn't get the yellow card out quick enough for it.
Yeah, I genuinely don't think I've ever seen that before. He just kind of walked into him while he was on the floor and went over. And the referee was keen to note that it was a totting up that was the reason the booking was given for other fouls around the pitch. But the fact is that wasn't a foul. He was just sat down on the floor and got ran into. So, yeah, I genuinely don't think I've ever seen that one before. But, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, how you keep finding ways for refs to be incompetent in various different games. It's a fascinating art.
Well, last night as well, I don't know if you caught the Bayern Munich game, but there was a rather weird penalty in that one as well, where the shot, he tried to block the shot, and then the forward followed through into the defender afterwards, went down and got a penalty, and even the commentators were shocked. So I think it's an art form, as you've said, but they're finding a way to perfect it. And speaking of perfecting art forms, Alisson returned last night, and you never think he was away, David, would you? That was, again, a little reminder, as you rightly pointed out in your match reaction, that's why he's the best goalkeeper in the world. I was blown away to see him come in after such, 10 weeks out roughly, come in and perform as well as he did. That was top notch.
I think it kind of shows why there's value in Liverpool taking it slow with his recovery as well. I mean, my feeling is that he probably could have been back a little bit earlier, but they really, really don't want to rush it. They're very cautious about these things, particularly as they have other injuries at the moment. So, and it looks like it was worthwhile because, as you say, he came in and looked like he hadn't missed a beat. I think he makes 5 saves in the game. And, he makes all of them look really comfortable, but they're not always comfortable. It's just kind of, he is always in the right place at the right time. His footwork is so good. And I just thought, you saw his class as well in moments. He's punching the ball away and how far he can get it. His distribution's fantastic. I think he only misplaces 3 passes. Really good throwing the ball out as well to get Liverpool moving quickly. He's just absolutely world class, isn't he? And the best goalkeeper in the world. And as much as they haven't kind of missed him outright, really, because Kelleher's been so good, I think Alisson is just that cut above basically every other goalkeeper in the world. And, it's going to make your side better to have someone who is that good and operating at the peak of the powers between the sticks.
So to keep with that kind of conversation around preventing the injury happening again, there was a bit of a warm down, I think, last night as well, focusing on Alisson. I think Ben Jacobs pointed it out that he wasn't injured or anything, but there was a specific warm down they looked like they were doing, and that must be part of this prevention moving forward.
Yeah, it's good to see that kind of new look medical staff as well are trying different things to kind of avoid these injuries, because it's so important to the season. I can't mention it enough, really, how Liverpool need to avoid having an injury crisis like they did last season, or the season is probably going to go the same way. That, for me, could be the biggest difference, never mind the tactics and the changes that have been made with players or whatever. The biggest difference could be just staying fit and keeping the majority of the squad fit for as long as possible. Obviously, it's unfortunate that Alisson got that injury, but they're trying to do everything they can now, as you say, different warm downs, different ways of warming up as well. More kind of days off around training as well. I understand that in sort of some unusual situations, they've been given days off when you maybe wouldn't expect it. They're trying different things. And I think so far, Liverpool have got a few injuries at the moment and a few concentrated in defence, but it hasn't been yet, touch wood, anywhere near as bad as it was last season. So my hope is that these new methods, that this new kind of new look staff is bringing, they can really be helpful in terms of injuries. And I think I genuinely do think it's worth points in the Premier League, and I would think it's worth progression in the Champions League in terms of it can be so important to keep that core group together. So, yeah, hopefully these methods continue working.
I remember when Arno was being appointed manager, we were all scrambling around to find information, and yourself was posting, and everybody was posting. One of the things that kept coming up was that yes, they still think there's improvements to be had from this squad, and that Arno can coach improvements. But also, I looked into Ruben Peters and the work together at Feyenoord, and their injury prevention rate was really, really impressive. Like their availability of first team players was above average anyway, certainly over 90%, I believe. So if you can get that, and it's difficult to quantify injuries you don't sustain. So it's going to be hard to actually figure this one out. But as you said, if he can keep that group, because he doesn't look like he likes to rotate too much either, David. So if he can keep that group of core players fit, that will definitely stand us in good stead.
Yeah, that was kind of, for me, I kind of saw the work they'd done in terms of player availability. That looked on paper to me a really good upside and something I was excited about that could develop this season and show improvement for Liverpool. But my worry was, as you say, he hadn't rotated much at Feyenoord. He was coming to a league where there are more games as a starting point. The Premier League is 38 games to 34. Obviously, you have the League Cup that they don't have in the Netherlands, and then you throw in the FA Cup, and then the intensity of the Champions League and the intensity of the league in general. And I thought this was going to be a little bit of an issue for him, and maybe that availability record would kind of slide. And like I say, they have had a few issues recently, but some of the, a lot of those are kind of contact injuries like you've had with Jota or Costa Simicas turning his ankle, Canate being landed on. Things like this you can't really avoid, but the ones you can avoid are the muscle injuries. And at the moment, it's kind of been Conor Bradley, Alisson, Trent have had muscle issues. Trent wasn't too long, and then those other two. But largely, they've done okay in terms of muscle issues, and those are the ones you can avoid and can do something about. And if you do that, you suddenly have fewer muscle issues. Then when you do get the contact injuries, such as the Jota one, then it's not completely decimating your squad because you're not already kind of 3-4 players down due to muscle injuries. So that's the importance of it. That's how you prevent a couple of injuries turning into a crisis, is keeping on top of those. And so far, as I say, keep saying touch wood because I don't want to inspire an injury crisis here, but so far they haven't done too badly in terms of that. So you just hope it keeps working.
One thing I did notice last night was we used to say this about Jordan Henderson actually back in his prime quite a bit. You noticed that Alexis McAllister wasn't in that team last night. The midfield had lots of energy, as you would expect from Jones and Szoboszlai in there, but that little bit of guile perhaps was missing, and that's where I thought we really did miss Alexis McAllister last night.
Yeah, I think, particularly when you're kind of up against a low block, his ability to unpick that is kind of unrivaled in the squad, certainly out of the midfielders. He's just got that little bit of class, hasn't he, when he gets into that number 10 position that can, and also kind of his timing in terms of speeding things up and slowing them down and knowing when is the right time to do that. He's really, really, really good in that, and probably better than any of his colleagues really in midfield. So yeah, he did look like a big miss in that game. And you do hope that, Fulham are probably going to approach it in a similar way at the weekend. So that's something to maybe worry about, that he's also suspended for that. But hopefully, because that's a home game, that will be helpful to Liverpool and they'll get over the line anyway. But he's massively vital player for this squad, really.
But also, if you look at the bright side of it, if we manage to get through the Fulham game with a win, we've beaten Girona, and Macca's got a bit of a mid-season break then. I believe he was over in Switzerland, if I'm not mistaken. So that will also stand us in good stead. And we've been lucky in that sense with Virgil van Dijk missing some international games, Mohamed Salah being let off a couple of Egypt games. This will stand us in good stead as the season goes on.
Yeah, I think with McAllister as well, the worry about this is that, I remember being in a breakout for an embargoed section with Arno a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was Ian Doyle asked him about McAllister and just said, he's played so much football over the last sort of year or so. He gets called up for Argentina and reports every time, and then he's a vital player for them, and then he rarely misses a game for Liverpool, and so it adds up a little bit. And for someone who puts himself about as he does, it's a lot of work he gets through. So I was really kind of relieved that because he's had this suspension, they've allowed him to just go on holiday, go and relax, put your feet up, because they know they absolutely squeeze everything out of him when he is available. So it's great that he's got that little break. And I think that will be really handy because things like that, they do add up. And when you come to kind of April, May time, we saw last season Liverpool just look dead on the feet, didn't they? And the whole idea this season is to avoid that by any means possible. So that has kind of worked in the favour, and hopefully reap the rewards going forward.
Were you surprised to see Darwin get the start last night? I thought maybe we would have seen Gakpo and Diaz after the Everton game having been postponed. So it did kind of take me by surprise to see Darwin get the nod through the centre last night.
Yeah, I was surprised just because I think Slot has very much been someone who kind of picks on form as well so far. And obviously Darwin was poor in the Newcastle game, so I thought that might hurt him being involved with this one. But obviously he was. And then I unfortunately didn't think he followed it up with a particularly good performance. So, if he does continue to pick on form, I think that might hurt Nunez for the weekend against Fulham. And I wonder whether we'll see Diaz come in and maybe if Jota's in the squad, then he might be first sub in that centre-forward position.
Do you think it's fair to say if Liverpool do move a forward on, whether it be January or in the summer, and most likely the summer probably, he's the one most at risk?
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. I'd probably go as far as to say that I would maybe expect him to be sold this summer. I don't think that's an outlandish statement, to be honest, because I think we're 2.5 seasons in and he just hasn't produced the consistency that's required of a centre forward in a Liverpool team that wants to win everything ultimately. And don't get me wrong, I'm not completely writing him off for the remainder of this season because I still think he's got a really important role. I think even with Jota fit, there are moments he's going to have to come into games, try and get a goal. There are games he's going to have to start in the League Cup or maybe the Premier League or Champions League when it gets a little busy. He's really got an important role to play. But as I say, it was such a long way into his Liverpool career now, and it would be a miracle, really, wouldn't it, if he finds that consistency of goal threat and ability to link play and be safe with the ball in build-up. I just don't think those qualities are there on a consistent basis, even though we see them in flashes. And it's just one of those that hasn't worked out. And we know already that, he wasn't really a signing that was made by that kind of transfer committee behind the scenes. It was very much Jurgen Klopp driven. So, with him no longer at the helm, they've given Arne Slot a season to kind of get a tune out of him halfway through and it hasn't worked. So it's just kind of one of those where maybe it's time to cut your losses. And I think there will be a market out there for him. I'm not concerned about that. But Liverpool clearly need someone who's better suited. And so I think it'd be best for all parties, really, if he moves on at the end of the season.
So 2 quick things on that. On there being a market for him, I was thinking about how much of a loss maybe we'd have to take, but you've seen in the past, and I know that's more Richard Hughes now that takes care of the transfers, but we've seen Michael Edwards pull out some incredible transfer fees for players that we've moved on. So I wonder maybe if we will see much of a loss. And to add on to that, you spoke about him not being a type of forward that would suit Arne Slot. What do you think an Arne Slot type of forward would be? Because that's another question that I've been asking myself over recent weeks.
I think it'd be Roberto Firmino, unfortunately, a prime level
wow.
Roberto Firmino. I just keep thinking when I'm watching the games at the moment how nicely he would fit into this because, Darwin's shot numbers have gone down significantly this season and similar of Jota, actually. So it's very much a kind of feature of the system and how Arne Slot is using his front line that he doesn't necessarily want his centre forward to be the one that takes the most shots. But what he does want them to be is a facilitator, is someone who links play and makes sure others can get in for shots. And, someone who works hard as well and presses. And I'm just thinking about all these qualities and how I'm basically just describing Roberto Firmino there and someone who's that selfless centre forward. He just would have been perfect. And so I just think that's what Liverpool need to look for the next centre forward. As I say, I don't even think that Jota is a perfect fit for this, but he is a better finisher than Darwin Nunez. His upsides are much bigger than Darwin Nunez's, so you can have him in the rotation and play in that role from time to time. Absolutely no problem with that. But I think for the outright starting centre forward, if they were to move Darwin on and look for another, they've got to kind of, for me, find another Roberto Firmino, to be honest. But, good luck with that. I'm glad I'm not the scout who has to do that. But I think profile-wise, that's what they should be looking for.
I do get a little chuckle when people start talking about Victor Gyökeres because it's basically the Darwin situation all over again. A player who's in the Portuguese league, putting up huge numbers, probably doesn't suit the way Arne Slot wants to play. And I've always thought Marmoush was the most likely personally because, again, he would give that one word that we speak about quite a bit, which is versatility. And that's something that a lot of our forwards do have.
Yeah, on Gyökeres, I think age-wise as well, the price he'd be going for, I do have question marks. I know others don't, about the fact that the Portuguese league. I do always wonder about that when some of the goal scorers that have come out of that league, and his experience in England was the Championship, so it is a slight step down. It's hard to judge that. Um, I just don't think that's someone who Liverpool would go for. And on the versatility, I totally agree with that. I think that is, kind of one of the calling cards really of this transfer setup and this recruitment staff that they've got, is they've absolutely always loved versatile forwards. Now, it's interesting to see whether they go down that route or they just think we've got a lot of versatility there in the forward line. Maybe we do just finally need someone who's an out-and-out centre forward who can play that role incredibly well. So it'll be interesting to see what they do go for. But I still do feel that is an area we could see looked at in the summer. Because I just think there's such a high possibility of a Darwin Nunez sale.
So just before we move on from the game last night, I just want to say it was great to see Elliott come on, get some more minutes, look lively. I think he's going to give Arnott a little something different in the games coming up.
Yeah, he's a fantastic player, isn't he? And he'll do it in a very different way to Szoboszlai. I mean, he puts himself about, but he's not as quick or as powerful. But what he gives you in the final third, I mean, we were talking there about Alexis McAllister and missing him in a game like this. If you can have Harvey Elliott in that number 10 position, then maybe that kind of covers off what you're missing with McAllister, because he can unpick a defence and he is so brilliant in those tight areas. He obviously not as deep lying as McAllister, but he can. That's what he's all about, really, is getting into that number 10 spot and trying to sort of thread the pass through. So really, really good to see him back. And I keep saying with every player that comes back that it's not the case that Liverpool have missed them, because they've been fantastic recently. But getting good players back is never a bad thing, particularly when you're playing so regularly as Liverpool are at the moment. So I'm looking forward to him, because I think he did really well in pre-season. So I'm really excited to see what he can do in this system.
So I guess one quick word about the injury update. Chiesa, very unfortunate to have the illness that probably stopped them. There was a bit of confusion around Diogo Jota, actually. Trained before the lads went, but didn't travel over. Have you got anything on that?
Yeah, wasn't surprised by that, to be honest, because he's only just back, and the part of training we see is not full training either. So maybe he's joining in that first part, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's fully doing training with the lads. So I wasn't shocked about that, to be honest. And I guess hard to say exactly when he'll be back. Could he come into training this week now when they're back and be in the Fulham squad? I certainly hope so. And he's obviously closer than he has ever been at any point. But if not Fulham, it'll probably be the game after that then. But it's literally marginal, and it's decided by whether he kind of trains in the next couple of days, or they just want to push it back a little bit because they don't want to risk it. So we'll have to see. But he's very, very close. And with Chiesa, obviously illness, he should be back. So really, really hope to see him in the squad at Fulham.
And then with regards to Ibu, do we still think the latter part of December is a reasonable time frame there?
Yeah, I think we saw the picture, didn't we, if he's not in a knee brace now. So that's encouraging and kind of tallies with what I'd said when we spoke about it. It's not quite that 5 to 6 weeks that was touted. There's a real hope that he can be back before that. So hopefully, back end of December, we see him rather than into January. And what a boost that would be to get him straight back as well. Because, again, not being a huge miss, but he's vital, isn't he? I would love to get him back in that defence and just tighten things up a little bit.
So we know Bradley's probably going to be after Christmas, but with regards to Costas, do we know when maybe Arna will have him available for selection?
Yeah, so spoke to kind of Costas' camp around this, and again, they were just kind of a little bit cagey around this one in terms of this is week to week he's being assessed. Obviously, the expectation was he would miss this week, and then maybe could be somewhere around next week, but it's just about, swelling going down, seeing what the pain is like. It's very much one that's quite hard to judge, so not really a clear timeline on this, but I would expect him back before Canate. I would say that, which we are hoping for back end of December with that. So hopefully soon.
David Coote was sacked from the PGMOL this week. There's two parts to this. I think they were kind of left with no alternative other than to let him go. But I want to keep reiterating, if he does have issues in his private life, it is heartening to see that the PGMOL are taking those responsibilities seriously. Because look, I'm somebody who goes in on refs most weeks, but I do remember, and I think it's important to communicate the human side of this, because if there is an addiction there or anything like that. We've all had parts of our lives or family members who've maybe suffered with addiction. So I'm always very mindful of the human side of this. But they were really left with no choice in the point about sacking him, David. I mean, I think they had to. He brought the organization, I guess, into disrepute at that point.
Yeah, that's it really. I mean, they have to maintain professional standards, don't they? And clearly we saw also the reporting around it. He clearly fell below that. I mean, I personally think he might have been at risk anyway with just the Jurgen Klopp comments for, maybe the implication of bias, which they can't afford to have. But then obviously everything else came out as well. And I think the die was cast then really. But as you say, it's sad it's got to this point. This has happened now, and you just hope he can be supported, because this, regardless of what you thought about him as a ref, this will be a really awful moment in his personal life. So I just hope he's kind of left alone to deal with those issues now, and that he can find employment elsewhere and kind of live a happy life away from all this really now.
Yeah, I think that's more than fair. I also wanted to just talk quickly about a young centre back whose name has come up, and it was very interesting. So for those of you, you won't know this, but myself and David were speaking beforehand, and I was throwing up a name, and usually I can read David's body language on these things. And as soon as I mentioned the player, it was kind of, but then I threw in the club, David, that the player was playing for. And we're talking about Joel Ordonez of Independiente del Valle over in Ecuador. And that kind of piqued your interest a little bit with the club in particular.
Yeah, just because I know that is a club where kind of Liverpool have been keeping an eye on players for a long time. Moises Caicedo came from there, and obviously they were very much aware of him at the point that Brighton pulled him from there. So clearly that league and that club in particular is somewhere they're keeping an eye on for young talent that's coming through. So I guess with this player, similarly, they will have an idea of where he's up to. Obviously, whether that translates into them ultimately signing him it's all about where the vacancies are in the squad and what they need to do going into the summer. Certainly don't think he'd be one for January. But it's an interesting name because obviously it's a young defender. Centre-back is an area they're kind of looking for someone in that mould. So, one of those that you'd be hard pushed to kind of rule that one out, I'd say, at the moment.
Is there any other names that you've heard doing the rounds recently with regards to the January window, I guess, in particular?
Yeah, there's a left back at Lanús, isn't there? Name.
I think I have his name in my notes. Bear with me.
Yeah, the name escapes me, but he was linked over the Julio Soler. That's it, Julio Soler.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one.
I saw he'd been linked again, and I did have kind of asked around about that one over the summer and kind of had it shot down as that was not one that they were kind of looking for. So I just wonder whether that's a little bit of agent talk. But again, we know left back's an area that I think going into next summer is going to be a big talking point, but I don't think they may be pushed to do anything just yet on that. And maybe it could come onto the radar at that point, but it's not anything that's kind of imminent. And I have seen a few reports kind of resurfaced over that one. So just wanted to kind of address that one, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it is important to keep an eye on that South American market in particular because we've seen a lot of talent come out of there in recent years. Two quick fire questions for you before we finish up. Firstly, and I'm fully expecting the answer to this to be no, but any updates on the contract situations?
Unfortunately not. I feel like we're getting closer than ever, though. I think you can see around the reporting now that all three of them have had offers, and obviously they've not been accepted, or we would be there. We would know it was a done deal by now because that's how quickly they turn these things around. But we're getting there. It's closer than it's ever been, and I still think there's a way to go in terms of you've got to finalize the details of these things, and there's still negotiating going on, but it's closer than it was a couple of months ago, which I think, if you're looking for encouragement, that is something to take hold of, I think.
And lastly, this is a bit of a strange question, but do we have any update on that documentary that was being filmed at the end of last season with Jurgen? I mean, I think initially people thought Disney Plus might pick it up, but so far we're kind of all just waiting to see what happens with it.
Yeah, so I had a conversation with someone probably about a month ago now about kind of where that was up to and whether anything had been agreed. And I know there was some talk of FSG linking up with Netflix, wasn't there, around the time? And but I don't. There's no deal agreed for it to go there specifically as part of that. It's not necessarily linked to Liverpool, so I don't expect that unless Netflix completely buy that separately. It's not part of that deal. But when I asked not that long ago, it was kind of still in talks basically about where this is going to end up. So I don't think that's imminent. I mean, I will probably check again on that now, actually, now you've mentioned it. But I was given the impression when I asked about a month ago that it wasn't kind of at the point where the deal was close to being announced. So yeah, still kind of up in the air where that's going to end up being broadcast.
I think I remember Linda Pudici at Netflix at a tape with a picture of them holding a meeting with Netflix. Now that you mentioned that, yeah, I think a lot of people just wondering where that went, and we're excited to see it. So just thought I'd ask. So what have we got coming up this week, David? Obviously Fulham coming up on Saturday. What have you got coming up for the week? Obviously you're going to be at the game.
Yeah, so I'll be at Anfield on Saturday, and obviously at the AXA on Friday to see what Slot has to say. If people want to check that on YouTube and on Substack, put a piece up today, kind of reflecting on yesterday and why Arne Slot was so unhappy, about the performance, with a kind of little look at the numbers behind it and some statistical graphs to kind of give you a better picture of what he particularly wasn't happy about. If people want to check that out.
Perfect. Always appreciate your insights, David. And of course, everybody for listening and watching. Thank you guys so much. We will catch up with you soon. Until then, let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Don't forget to check out David on Substack and, of course, the David Lynch YouTube channel. And we'll catch you soon. Bye-bye.